Welcome back to Close Up. The latest UNH poll shows two candidates in double digits in the Republican U.S. Senate primary. Don Bolduc, of course, has the big lead, but in second place with a chance at a comeback win is Chuck Morse, the longtime state Senate president. Mr. Morse is our guest this morning in studio. Thanks for joining us, Senator.
Good morning, Al.
So, from your perspective, there's a simple question that Republican primary voters have to answer. Why not Don Bolduc?
Oh, I think it's been since January I've been proving why it's Chuck Morse, and I've been running against Maggie Hassan since then. I've accomplished a lot in the state of New Hampshire. We're out proving that to voters, and that's what we're proving every day, and I think that's going to show up on September 13th.
What's the conservative case against the general, though? You've got to get past it.
Yeah, well, I think the conservative case is, you know, I have passed constitutional carry. I have lowered taxes in New Hampshire. I think that's what the public wants to hear, somebody that got it done, and that's certainly what we did.
You've got a super PAC coming in behind you, essentially, millions of dollars coming in, touting you as, quote, one tough conservative. Is there enough time left on the clock to make up the difference in the polls?
Oh, I think people are starting to pay attention as we get into the holiday weekend. I really do think now's the time they're listening to us. You know, these outside groups that are coming into New Hampshire, they're coming in from both sides, Adam, and what they're going to do is what they're going to do. But I've certainly raised my money in New Hampshire, and we're working to make sure the voters hear from us.
In some way, don't you think that you're going to owe the powerful Republicans who are coming in to back you up here? Essentially, how are you ever going to say no to Mitch McConnell if you owe him your seat?
Yeah, absolutely not. It's never been that way in New Hampshire. Just ask Governor Sununu. I go and fight for what I believe in, and I try to get our policies across the board, and we've done that in New Hampshire.
Major speech from President Biden this last week, essentially calling out former President Trump and his closest allies in the Make America Great Again movement as a threat to democracy. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, that's disgraceful. You know, I really do think that the citizens in this country deserve better, and that's what's showing up, you know, in this election right now. I think people want change. They want common sense people like myself in government that are going to fight for everyone, and that's what I've been doing.
This same last week, though, you have former President Trump saying that he's strongly considering the idea of pardons for people who attacked the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. These are people who beat police officers and were violent. Is President Biden's critique, does it land when former President Trump says things like that, though?
No, I think what happened on January 6th was disgraceful, and obviously I think that the process should take place there, but due process should take place. You know, there were people that were trying to burn down Washington the summer before that, and nothing's happened to them. So I really think our government is gone amok on how we should deal with, you know, the different agencies. I think that deserves investigation.
Perhaps more than anyone else in New Hampshire over the last decade, you've had a very powerful say in shaping the direction of policy in the Granite State as the state Senate president. Energy costs are going to be wiping some people out this winter. And of course, there's a finger to be pointed at Washington. But I'm curious, do you bear any responsibility as the state Senate president for so many years over this last decade for a system that isn't diverse enough and doesn't have enough protection for residential ratepayers against this crisis that's going to be happening?
Yeah, I think when it comes to energy, it really is what you want to do right now is send a guy like me to Washington, because it's about supply. We need to make sure that we have petroleum, we have natural gas, we have all of that coming into New England. And that's what we need to beef up to make sure that we drive costs down. Look, anyone we're talking to right now, whether it's electric or oil or gas, they're scared to death in this state right now. I think that's where I can make a difference.
Shouldn't you have done more, though, in the last 10 years to ensure something like this wouldn't happen?
Adam, I fight every day for my constituents, and they certainly talk to me about this. You know, we made sure that we weren't subsidizing anything to do with electricity in New Hampshire, and we just need to get the sources here.
On this program in January, we asked you about the issue of abortion, and you said you would vote for what you had already passed in Concord, essentially, a ban at 24 weeks gestation at the national level now. Now you're saying more that it's an issue for the states. Why the change?
Well, I think that decision was made in the courts, that they pushed it back to the states, and I think that's where it should be decided. I think what we've done in New Hampshire, banning abortion in the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th month, is what most of our constituents want, and we passed it, and that's what's in place.
So are you saying you wouldn't vote for that in Washington, or you would?
I think the states need to make these decisions now, and that's what's happened.
But the Supreme Court didn't essentially say that Congress can't do anything. And of course, we know that the Senate has passed, I think twice in the last decade, essentially a bill, Micah's Law, I think it's called. It's the, let's see here, I've got the name for it here, the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. That's it. Filibustered by Democrats both times. Are you saying you just wouldn't vote for that, a 20-week abortion ban?
Well, what I'm saying is I'm going to fight in Washington and make sure that we let states make decisions on all subject matters. You know, if we're doing it in the states and we're doing it better, like education, let's make sure that we push these things down to the states to make the decisions in the state legislatures, because they're closer to the people.
Isn't there some awkwardness here, right? Being pro-life is a moral stand, and this is about protecting an unborn baby, if you're coming at it from the pro-life perspective. But now Republicans are saying, no, sorry, federalism, can't do it.
Well, I've been pro-life, and, you know, I've stated that right along. I think there's nothing awkward about what we've done in New Hampshire. We passed banning abortion in the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th month, and we said that we wouldn't let tax dollars in New Hampshire be used to fund abortion. I think there's a dramatic difference between myself and Maggie Hassan on that subject matter.
Absolutely true. But how would you vote in Congress when that comes to the floor in the Senate?
I would support the fact that the state legislature should be making these decisions.
Okay. I'm curious if you would have voted for the Ukraine aid package, billions of dollars to help that country withstand the Russian invasion.
Yeah, absolutely not. And I think the people in New Hampshire know me by now. I make sure that I get details when it's coming to budgeting, and I make sure I work pretty hard at, if we make a decision in Concord, we ought to know what we're doing. That $42 billion that was sent to Ukraine, there was no discussion about what was in that legislation. That's wrong. That's not how we should be doing things.
How do you stand up to Russia, though? And I think this is a broader philosophical question, because if you had told me 10 years ago that a Russian despot would be trying to resurrect the former Soviet Union at gunpoint, invading other countries, and that the party of Ronald Reagan would be essentially saying, sorry, Ukraine, you're on your own on this one, I wouldn't have believed it.
Yeah, I think Judd Gregg said it best in New Hampshire. You know, what we need to do is we need to make this country, the United States, energy independent and create us to be leaders again in this country. I think that sends a strong message to countries like Russia and the OPEC nations, you know, and that's what we need to do. I've been fighting all along since I got in this race in January that we need to make America energy independent, and that would make a stronger president, and that's what we need to do when I get down there.
So the billions of dollars in financial aid, no. Would you still support the sending of these, you know, HIMARS systems, the weapon systems we're sending?
Well, I'll support those systems, but let's make the discussion about, we need to know what we're taking in income in this country. We need to know what we're spending. There's no discussions about those kind of budgeting items. You'd never see that in a New Hampshire town. Never. New Hampshire towns talk about this all day long when they're making decisions and people are paying taxes. Let's get to that way in Washington.
This FBI Mar-a-Lago search warrant story, a lot of Republicans are very upset that this happened in the first place. But as we've learned more about it, it sounds like the federal government was asking for these documents back and the former president wasn't giving them back. Should a private citizen, this is no longer someone who has executive privilege, be able to retain these documents and just hold them, and the FBI is saying, okay, former President Trump, just when you're done, just give them back. And the idea that the government just can't take them back, they can't go in and get them. I'm puzzled by this.
Yeah, but it's disgraceful. I mean, what happened in that situation, politicizing the FBI, is wrong. It's wrong for this country. That alone should be investigated. The Biden administration, you know, using things like that, it's going to happen with the IRS in this country, the way they're working through that. The CDC, no one has faith in anymore. These are things that have all gone wrong because politics got into them. Let's end all that. Let's investigate why the leadership of all these organizations are not doing their job.
Should former President Trump have given the documents back when the government asked for them?
I'm sure there's legal things in here where President Trump should be working with the FBI to give documents. But let's be honest, Adam. What happened that day was politicizing the process, and I don't believe in that.
And so what do you think the consequences should be for the FBI? Some of your opponents have indicated they're fine with it being dismantled.
Yeah, that I think is going way too far. I mean, the FBI is needed in this country. What we really need to do is investigate the leadership of the FBI to see why they allowed politics to get into the leadership. I think that's the part that this country is failing on, and I will do that when I get into the Senate.
All right. Senator Chuck Morse, we'll see you on the Granite State debate stage next week. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Adam.
All right, thank you.